views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. Tonight's guest is a councilman in the North Bronx. We're going to talk with Councilmember Andrew Cohen about the recently rejected Right to Know Act, the city's budget, zoning issues in Bedford Park, some other local issues like trees on Marsh Loop Parkway, and an historic cooperative going through a board management controversy, and much more. If you have questions or comments, send an email to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or post it on our Facebook page, and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, the councilman from the 11th District in the Bronx, which includes the Bronx communities of Bedford Park, Kingsbridge, Norwood, Riverdale, Van Cortlandt Village, Wakefield, Woodlawn, and more. Welcome back, Councilmember Andrew Cohen.
It's my pleasure to be here. It includes the studio.
That's right. This is his home, as a matter of fact. Let's talk a little bit about probably the biggest controversy going on across America these days is policing and whether the police are misbehaving or not acting properly, certainly in certain incidents, and then certainly the other way around, that the police are becoming targets of people who may have issues with them. Interestingly, I thought it was fascinating and frankly surprising the City Council refused to vote on the Right to Know Act, instead of allowing the NYPD to make its own reforms. Considering what is going on, I thought it was surprising. Were you surprised at the deal?
Well, it's not that uncommon that we come up with a negotiated agreement with the administration, which is what happened here. We had some legislation, and the Speaker and the administration thought it was best to achieve these goals administratively rather than by legislation. And that's where we're at today. If that doesn't work, legislation could be revisited. The Right to Know Act is made up of two bills, one of which I supported, one of which I didn't support.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to break that down. You know I'm going to ask you about
it.
But just that process, the fact that there were many of your colleagues were like very much for it, but basically the Speaker went into a meeting of some sort with the mayor and potentially the police commissioner and came out and said, well, we're not going to do this. Is that a good process? Is that what we want?
Well, the Speaker, I mean, it didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, the Speaker told us about the process as it was going on, and we had a Democratic conference where we discussed it. And I think that the members really actually have confidence in the Speaker that she knows what she's doing and that she knows the best way to lead. And I think also that there is a benefit to the collaborative nature of working with the administration to try to achieve the goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we get a bill that the mayor vetoes, that we don't have enough votes to override, then that's the end of that.
Would you have voted for it?
Again, there are two bills.
Right.
One was a police ID bill. Essentially, when you had an interaction with the police, you would get a business card. And that bill was Councilman Torres's bill, and I supported that bill. I think it was a very good bill. It gave you knew who the police officer was, you knew his precinct, and you knew how to contact the CCRB if you wanted to, if you didn't feel like you were treated in a way that was fair. And the other bill, which I did not support, I kind of felt was a burden-shifting bill, where essentially the police had to go through a lot of hoops in regards to consent to search. So it's not a probable cause search, but it's a search where they just want to search, and seeking your permission, and that bill really required a lot of affirmative consent, and I thought it was basically burden shifting. If you have a right, if the police ask you, can I see what's in your pocket, you have the right to say no. It's not the police's job to assert that right for you.
But in this particular case, they're making it a policy so that it's kind of self-enforcement. You have confidence that they will do that?
I do. I think that what most people were concerned about were the incident where the police kind of walked up to somebody in a sort of an intimidating way, what's in your pocket? And that caused a reaction where someone would show them what's in their pocket when there was really no cause. I think that trying to take the edge off of that a little bit, and I think the commissioner, I think that the department in general wants to tone down those kind of interactions, and I think that we can do that administratively and through policy.
A lot of us have had interactions with the police. Frankly, neither you nor I are of color, so that we may not be targets in the same way that other people in the city of New York are. I happened to witness some plainclothes officers, either arresting or interrogating or searching some people recently. And he had the guy on the car, and he said, tell me what's in your pocket. Don't let me find anything. It was very intimidating. It was, I guess not, it didn't strike me as an above board action. I'm not totally familiar with what the rules are. I wonder if this kind of thing will stop that kind of intimidation. I'm not saying that if whoever it was, broke the law. I didn't really know the circumstances. I just felt that was a rather oppressive way of approaching policing.
Again, I don't know the circumstances you're describing specifically, but that doesn't sound like a consent search. That sounds like somebody who's about to get arrested. And what a police officer does not want to find when he sticks into your pocket, it reaches into your pocket, is a needle, is something dangerous that they could hurt themselves on.
Well, I think he was more talking about drugs. I don't want to find, or weapons, of course.
Yeah, or a sharp, they could have a razor blade, they could have something dangerous in which they could cut themselves. That's always an issue at that point when but that sounds like a scenario where they were making an arrest, and so the search was probably not consent. They had the right to search at that point.
We hear it, and you hear it, and I hear it, and everybody hears it from people in Bronx communities, and frankly communities all over the country, that police are oppressive. You don't have to look too far. We've seen, what happens. 2 black men were killed, one in Louisiana and the other in Minnesota. And very questionable incidents, to say the least. How do we get a sense of fair-mindedness by the men and women in blue so that, right or wrong, at least people don't feel like they're being targeted? And that, to me, is the biggest issue, and of course, what would suggest why we've had the reaction the other way that killed the police in Dallas and now in Baton Rouge.
Well, I would say honestly that I think that we have something to look at here at home. I mean, I represent the 52nd, the 50th, and the 47th precinct, and by and large, I don't get the sense from the people who are policed or the police that we have that kind of tense relationship here. I think that
as much. You don't think so?
I definitely.
And you don't hear that from constituents?
I definitely do not. I think the 4-7 had an incident several years ago. But by and large, I find that people think that the police in the Bronx, and I think it's borne out by the fact that you don't see a lot of protests, you don't see the kind of activity that you see in Brooklyn. I think that there's something going on in the Bronx where people feel that they have a good, that the police are more interactive, more community-based, and like, again, you see it on the ground. You don't see the same kind of protests that you see in other parts of the city here in the Bronx.
I'm guessing that many viewers would not necessarily agree with that, but...
well, I think it's indisputable, though, that you don't see the protests that you see in Brooklyn or you see in Manhattan here in the Bronx. I mean, I think that's...
Not of late. Yeah, sure. We've had our share of incidents in the past. All right, let's go to maybe some more benign, if you will, subjects, because we could talk about that for quite a long time. Talk about the $82 billion budget that was the council and the administration agreed on. Seems to me this was as healthful a process as we've had in the city of New York. In other words, this kind of went the way a budget negotiation should go. Am I right in thinking that?
Again, I mean, I think that right now we're in a moment in time where the council and the mayor are working by and large collaboratively to achieve the best interest of the city, and I think that the budget is an example of that. There were a lot of good things in the budget. I have to say for myself as a local legislator, I get a lot of pleasure out of bringing home the bacon, and I think that I've been successful at that. And as the chair of the Mental Health Committee, we had an unprecedented commitment to mental health on the city council side and on the mayor's side. So it was a very good budget all around for me as a council member, and I think for the city as a whole.
So I was just reviewing some of the items. You got $2.9 million in capital projects for 2017. You want to celebrate what you're hoping to do?
That was what was quoted in the paper, but actually
that's where I got the number from.
It's more than that. I don't know how that number came into the paper, but I really try to make sure that technology in the schools.
What is the accurate number, by the way?
Over $5 million. Actually, closer to
very
$6
nice.
million. technology in the schools, it's funny, I try to visit all the schools regularly. And so when I first got into office, I saw that everybody had smart boards pretty much, but it turns out that there's smart board 2s now, so the second generation of smart boards for the schools. So I was really we had a significant number of technology grants for all the elementary schools and some middle schools. We're doing something on the Clinton campus over here. We're going to build
DeWitt Clinton campus.
Yes,
Okay.
we're going to build a greenhouse for a horticulture program there. You mentioned the vehicle for the police department for the 50th precinct.
Well, actually, we talked about that before the show. I know that I mentioned it, but we did that
Sorry
before
about
the show.
All right, so I don't want to give anything away. But
Well, we can talk
yeah,
about it.
we got a Gator vehicle to step up patrols in Van Cortlandt Park. There have been some high-profile crimes, although the Van Cortlandt Park is overwhelmingly safe. There have been some crimes that have gotten some attention. And patrolling the park is difficult for the 50th precinct, frankly, because they just didn't have the appropriate vehicle. So we were able to get money for that.
I wish I knew I could just say, oh, a Gator vehicle. Sorry, what is a Gator vehicle?
It's like an ATV. It has 6 wheels, and it's a very like a high-powered golf cart.
Are these used in parks? Is this an unusual, and it goes on all different terrain,
Yes.
presumably?
Yes, they're used in parks. Parks Department uses them as well as the police department. I think even the fire department has some, but we didn't have one parked for the 50th, and that definitely impeded their ability to patrol.
Let's talk a little bit about Van Cortlandt Park, since you brought it up. One of the other items, plans to renovate one of the entrances to Van Cortlandt Park. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the goals I've had as the council member is to try, as I served on the board of the Friends of Van Cortlandt Park many years ago, and it's always been interested in trying to network the community and the park into one seamless. We're doing some, working with DOT about maybe changing the flow of traffic on Broadway to try to make it more accessible. And the north end of the park is a little bit of the forest primeval, and it's not that accessible. So trying to make this entrance more accessible, more attractive, I'm hoping will just increase people's desire to go inside the park.
Sticking with the idea of parks and trees and all that, there's very fascinating kind of back and forth about Marshalloux Parkway and the trees there. Historically, many years ago, there were some trees cut down that should not have been cut down, and it was acknowledged, we're talking 15, 20 years ago, by the Parks Department. And then more recently, there were trees put, many people who know Marshalloux Parkway, trees put in the center of the median that runs through Marshalloux Parkway.
Dogwoods.
Right, and then now there's talk of actually taking those trees out, and I'm going to just give, since it's a talk show, I'm going to give my editorial opinion. I really thought it was a mistake to put those trees there. I think that play space and recreation space, and there were people who had, especially in the fall, regular, flag football games and maybe some soccer games. I thought that it was harmful, really, as much as I would support the notion of trees. Why put them there and discourage people and kids from playing? So now they're talking about taking the trees up. Sort it out for us. What's going on?
Well, this is going to be an exciting segment here because I think you're totally wrong.
Okay.
The reason I support the trees on the Parkway is I don't think it's an appropriate place for recreation. And I think that you will admit that you've had the experience of driving along the Parkway and a soccer ball come rolling out into the roadway and really just in terror that there's some kid chasing that ball. Recreation in the middle of 6 lanes of traffic to me does not make a lot of sense. So I think this is a way that we can preserve the bucolic nature of the Parkway, that they're attractive, but we need to find safe places. The Oval is a great place to recreate. On both sides of the Parkway, I have Kossuth Playground and I have Knox Gates Playground. There are places to recreate along the Parkway, but I think smack in the middle of 6 lanes of traffic is not an appropriate place.
Before I react to that, so what is actually the plan? What's going on? Why would somebody say, well, there are trees there, but now we want to take them out? Is it because of the recreation issue?
I think it is really, there's not really a good planning process.
I'm not asking you to argue the other side either.
Yeah, well, no, but these are the facts are that I don't think that the trees went in a very community-oriented way. The outgoing borough commissioner apparently decided that these trees are going in. There was no interaction. No interaction with the community board, but now that they're there, I think that they, A, are attractive, and B, I think that, like I said, that the having people, play soccer in the median in between 6 lanes of traffic is just not good.
Well, now I'm going to address that part of it.
Okay.
I don't recall, I mean, I've driven on Marshall Parkway any number of times. I don't recall ever having to dodge a ball, but maybe it's true. I'm just very sympathetic to the need for recreation, and the more space, the better, because if we don't have young people recreating, then we have young people doing worse things, and so, if the problem is balls getting on the parkway, well, put up some fencing, or, limit the space a little bit so that they can't play near the edge, and you can, that would be my reaction.
It's not the ball going on the parkway, it's the kid chasing the ball that I'm concerned about.
Right.
And I mean, I think in all fairness, like...
Is there any history of an accident? I'm not aware of that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I definitely, like I said, I could vouch for the experience of watching the balls go onto the parkway. I'm surprised, actually, that you would not concede that you've had that experience.
Well, either not concede or don't remember.
Yeah.
I can't be that tough.
And like I said, I have a record to run on in terms of my commitment to parks and funding, capital improvements in the Oval and at these other playgrounds along the parkway. So it's really not I totally agree with you that we need recreation space. We need more of it. We need a deeper commitment to our parks than the city has made thus far. Mm-hmm. And I put a lot of capital money into park improvements, but I think that the design is not compatible with. Mm-hmm.
On that note, and frankly, again, it's a talk show, so I can editorialize all I want. I was very encouraged by and this is not your district, but it came out of the city, the notion of building 50 soccer fields throughout the city of New York. This, to me, the mayor had touted himself as a progressive or whatever people would like to label him. To me, this is good progressive thinking. Just want to talk about, even though, again, I know it's not your district, but I think this was a very positive development. And if we want to address some of the other issues that we're talking about of crime and policing and youth crime and everything else, this is one way to take a look at that.
Well, I believe that if we left the studio now and we walked over to the Oval, it would be packed with people playing soccer and using the field there. I have no, although I have love for Van Cortlandt Park, a deep commitment to it, I mean, the amount of use that the Oval gets on a per foot basis, I think, is unprecedented.
Right.
And so, I mean, those kind of spaces, people love them.
Well, I kind of sandbagged it because if it's so crowded, that's why we need more space in Marshall Parkway. But okay, we don't have to go there.
We need safe space, Gary.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk a little bit about. It's been written up on several issues, several articles in the Norwood News about Bedford Park and zoning. Now, you were on the show, and I thought really well-spoken and highly concerned about the recent zoning plans that had been bandied about and then amended and then ultimately approved. People in Bedford Park are saying, why are we getting targeted, use that word again, for development? Why can't we protect the sanctity of the kind of neighborhood and the kind of homes that we have?
Well, I think that we have an example in Brooklyn of development that really was out of control, and by the time people kind of caught on to the fact that things were out of control, it was really too late. And I do think that there are market forces coming to bear in Bedford Park, that it's an attractive place to live, there's good access to public transportation, the housing stock there is attractive, and I think that people are discovering it, and I think that that is creating some development pressures. So I think that there's an opportunity for city planning and the community to work together to come up with a zoning plan that will preserve the character of Bedford Park, but also maybe where there are places that it would be appropriate for additional development, perhaps on Jerome Avenue, maybe the north end of Jerome Avenue, there might be opportunities for development, and when we could really kind of preserve the 6-story character of a lot of Bedford Park and even some of the private homes.
People are concerned about being pushed out. I mean, in other words, that if you build up and then all of a sudden people with a little more income coming in, I mean, I'm repeating what we all know has happened and does go on in the city. How do you prevent that? This is an age-old question, how do you do development, how do you do good development and not have that happen? And I'm pretty sure that's what the people in Bedford Park are thinking.
The people, I mean, to the extent that the community board and their land use committee is representative of some of the thinking there, I have to, tip my hat to Community Board 7 that they are, I think, reasonable people who understand that, like, you can't stop progress altogether, but they want to make a community that is that continues to develop and continues to improve, but that is also not going to force people out. And I think that that's happening by, again, a very deliberative process. I had somebody come to me recently. The city council can give a tax abatement. I think with 421A screwed up in Albany, people are taking advantage of these Article 11s that the city council can do. And although I was not required, they don't require community board approval, or it's not like ULIRP, I told this developer, why don't you go to Community Board 7? If they give you a letter of support, then I'm going to support the project. So I think having that kind of dialogue with the community and having projects that make sense and that the community seems to think that fit in with the community is a way to try to at least slow down the tide.
Mm-hmm. The Broadway corridor from Marble Hill all the way to really as far as you want to go, the end of the train, or really maybe 238th Street or 240th Street, is seeing all kinds of development. I mean, 2 malls already, and there looks to be a third on the way. Talk to me a little bit about the health of that corridor. I think I went by another property that is still, I know what it was. I think it was the BP station. There appears to be some construction on the corner. Talk to me about the health of the corridor and what you think is good and maybe some concerns.
Well, I think the willingness of people to commit vast amounts of capital to Broadway is impressive. I mean, I think that just says something about the economic environment here, with the significant reduction in unemployment. I mean, there's an opportunity for retailers, and I think that they're taking advantage of it. That Target, which is actually not in my district, but when that Target first opened up, it was the busiest Target in the United States.
I believe that's the case.
It's like second or third now.
Right.
But there's really an opportunity, I think, to retail there. I belong to the BJ's, and like.
Let's talk about that, BJ's. And in fact, I believe the last time you were here, we talked about the parking and situation. It seems to me that we put these things in, and then we think about the driving and the parking after the fact. Talk about it's pretty crowded if you go by there, and I do go by there sometimes.
Community Board 8, to their credit, told DOT that there will be certain issues when when the mall was still on paper and there were not a brick laid yet. And DOT's attitude was, let's create the problem and then we'll fix it. And that has been their attitude. And I think in part it's sort of regulatory, like they need to justify the addition of traffic controls, and they do that.
So in other words, they can't do it beforehand until they see the traffic.
I think that yes, that was their story. Whether that's, I didn't research to see if there's some way around that, but that seems to be the case, and they have been responsive. There are traffic counters on Putnam Avenue there.
Well, what is very interesting to me is that in that part of the Bronx, and some people may know, I do live in the councilman's district and live in that area, there are really nice restaurants and some bars and night spots and things like that popping up, and yet people aren't complaining about gentrification. In other words, in many other parts of the Bronx, with good reason, when they get nice new places, they say, aha, it's bringing in other people, it's the first step, but we don't hear that from that part of the Bronx. Any idea why, and kind of, is there a solution there that can be translated to other neighborhoods that are fighting so badly every time something good comes in? Frankly, it's balanced off with something bad happening.
Well, I think a lot of the Northwest Bronx has sort of a history as a middle-class enclave, so I don't think that the issues are quite as pronounced. I think that a lot of people in Van Cortlandt Village, they're homeowners there. So I don't know if it's as striking as perhaps it might be in Port Morris or other places where there's some nice amenities come and people are concerned, who is this amenity for? Mm-hmm. And there seem to be a lot of nice things happening, particularly in Van Cortlandt Village and
That you're happy about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I want to bring up something, frankly, I cannot deny it. It's a personal thing for me because it involves the housing project that I live in, Park Reservoir Houses, the first Mitchell Lama in the state of New York. Has had an historic relationship with Amalgamated Houses. Now there's a board of directors, despite the fact that Park Reservoir is, I can tell you firsthand, is incredibly well managed, incredibly well maintained. They're talking about splitting from Amalgamated. I don't know if you want to weigh in on the particulars of that. What are your thoughts about that notion?
Well, I think that the relationship between the two developments has been beneficial, and it's 60 years if it's worked. I'm not sure why you'd want to change it. That being said, it's not necessarily my place to get involved in the internal politics of a co-op. So I'm sort of I'm watching. I'm hoping that cooler heads will prevail and that maybe that they will find a way to continue to the relationship that they've had for all this time.
Final question, Councilman. You, frankly, come across as relatively comfortable about what's going on in the district. Are there problems? And beforehand I was thinking, gee, what can I ask the councilman about? Things seem, stable. Give me a perspective of something that you are concerned about, or that you're really a problem that you're going to work on as we go into the future.
I think I try to keep level-headed because the problems, people
I'm not trying to create one where there isn't one.
I'll tell you, I will answer the question, but I'll tell you just generally speaking that you have to kind of have a long horizon, that there's very few problems in which I can kind of snap my fingers and fix, although there are some where, like, there's a street light out and we can get that fixed relatively quick, but like some problems, they take a long time to fix. And like we talked about Bedford Park, the people who live in Bedford Park are very concerned about there's one lot where someone's proposing to build a 14-story building, and that's got people really agitated, and trying to work with city planning to try to see if we can do something to, and I don't know if we can stop that building, but try to come up with a plan that kind of protects the community as a whole is something I'm going to continue to do for the next 18 months that I have in this term, and hopefully if I'm reelected in the next term, not that I'm announcing I'm running, but I'm running.
And there it is, you heard it first.
And then, like I've had several schools that have had some real problems that I've really gotten involved with, PS 207, PS 24, where I've really had to roll up my sleeves and kind of do a lot of hand-holding to try to see if we can solve some of the challenges.
Councilmember Andrew Cohen, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate the time, and we're going to get you back. Maybe if something goes wrong, we'll really get you back here, but hopefully that never really happens.
From your
Appreciate your time, that's right. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show, or anything going on in the Bronx, or something you want us to forward to the councilman and get you a response on, we've done that before, then send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, or put it on our Facebook page, and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like the Bronx Talk Facebook page, and you can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Our producer, of course, is Jayla Juberas, and director is Shirley Arrieta. We have a cast of thousands. We thank them, we thank you, we thank him. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on a sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov